It was a day in March. Never, never begin a story this way when you write one. No opening could possibly be worse. It is unimaginative, flat, and dry. But in this instance, it can be allowed, as the following paragraph, which should have started the story, is too wild to be thrown in the face of an unprepared reader. Sarah was crying over the menu card. To explain this, you are allowed to guess that oysters were all over, or that she had ordered onions, or that she had just come from the cinema. But since all your guesses are wrong, you will please let the story continue. The gentleman who said that the world was an oyster, which he would open with his sword, became more famous than he deserved. It is not difficult to open an oyster with a sword, but did you ever notice anyone try to open it with a typewriter? Sarah had managed to open the world a little with her typewriter. She was a freelance typewriter and canvassed for odd jobs of copying. The greatest success of Sarah's battle with the world was the arrangement that she made with Schulenburg's home restaurant. The restaurant was next door to the old red brick building in which she had a room. One evening, after dining at Schulenburg's, Sarah took the menu away with her. It was written in almost unreadable handwriting, neither English nor German, and it was so difficult to understand that if you were not careful, you began with the dessert and ended with the soup. The next day, Sarah showed Schulenburg a beautifully typewritten menu with everything listed in right and proper places. Everything from the appetizers to the words at the bottom not responsible for overcoats and umbrellas. Schulenburg was very pleased. Before Sarah left him, he had made an agreement with her. She would provide typewritten menus for the 21 tables in the restaurant, a new one for each day's dinner, and new ones for breakfast and lunch as often as there were changes in the food, or as neatness made necessary. In return for this, Schulenburg would send 3 meals a day to Sarah's room, and send her also each afternoon a list in pencil of the foods that were planned for Schulenburg's customers on the next day. Both were satisfied with the agreement. Schulenburg's guests now knew what the food they ate was called, even if its nature sometimes puzzled them. And Sarah had food during a cold winter, which was the main thing for her. And then the calendar announced it was spring. But it was not. Spring comes when it comes. The frozen snows of January still lay hard outside. Musicians still played in the good old summertime, with the expression and determination with which they had played it in December. The city was still in the clutches of winter. One afternoon, Sarah shivered in her bedroom. She had no work to do except Schulenburg's menu. Sarah sat in her squeaky rocking chair and looked out of the window. The calendar on the wall kept crying to her, "Springtime is here, Sarah. Springtime is here, I tell you. Look at me, Sarah. My figures show it." "You've got a neat figure yourself, Sarah. A nice springtime figure. Why do you look out the window so sadly?" Sarah's room was at the back of the house. Looking out of the window, she could see the windowless brick wall of the box factory on the next street. But she thought of grassy lanes shaded with cherry trees and bordered with raspberry bushes and roses. In the summer of last year, Sarah had gone into the country and fallen in love with a farmer. In writing a story, never hark back like this. It is bad art and destroys interest. Let it go forwards. Sarah stayed 2 weeks at Sunnybrook Farm. There she learned to love old Farmer Franklin's son, Walter. Farmers have been loved and married in less time, but young Walter was a modern farmer. He even had telephone in the building where he milked the cows, and was very knowledgeable. It was in this shaded and raspberried lane that Walter had won her, and together they had sat and woven a crown of dandelions for her hair. He has praised the effect of the yellow flowers against her brown hair, and she had left the flowers there and walked back to the house swinging her hat in her hands. They planned to marry in the spring.
At the first signs of spring,
Walter said. And Sarah came back to the city to hit the typewriter keys. A knock at the door dispelled Sarah's dreams of that happy day. A waiter had brought the rough pencil draft of the restaurant's next day menu, in old Schulenburg's angular handwriting. Sarah sat down at her typewriter and slipped the card beneath the roller. She was a nimble worker. Generally, in an hour and a half, the 21 menu cards were ready. Today, there were more changes on the menu than usual. The soups were lighter. There were changes in the regular meat dishes. The gracious spirit of spring pervaded the entire menu. Sarah's fingers danced over the typewriter. Down through the courses she worked, giving each item its position according to its length with an accurate eye. Just above the desserts came the list of vegetables: carrots and peas, asparagus on toast, the perennial tomatoes and corn and succotash, lima beans, cabbage, and then Sarah was crying over the menu. Tears from the depths of some divine despair rose in her heart and gathered to her eyes. For she had received no letter from Walter in 2 weeks, and the next thing on the menu was dandelions. Dandelions with some kind of egg, but never mind the egg. Dandelions, with whose golden flowers Walter had crowned her his queen of love and future bride. Dandelions, the messengers of spring, reminder of her happiest days. But what a magical thing spring is! Into the great cold city of stone and iron, a message had to be sent. There was none to bring it, except the little messenger of the fields, with its rough green coat. This dent de lion, this lion's tooth, as the French chefs call him. When in flower, he would help with love-making, wreathed in my lady's nut-brown hair. When young and unblossomed, he goes into the boiling pot and delivers the message of nature. In a short while, Sarah forced back her tears. The cards must be typed. But, still in a faint golden glow from her dream of dandelions, she fingered the typewriter keys absently for a little while, with her mind and heart in the meadow lane with her young farmer. But soon she came back to the stone streets of Manhattan, and the typewriter began to jump and race. At 6 o'clock, the waiter brought her dinner and carried away the menu. While Sarah ate, she sadly put aside the dish of dandelion, just as its bright flower had been changed into a dark, unimportant vegetable. So had her summer hopes wilted and perished. At 7:30, the couple from the next room began to quarrel. The man in the room above played the flute. The gaslight went a little lower. 3 coal wagons started to unload. By these signs, Sarah knew that it was the time for her to read. She got her book, settled her feet on the trunk, and began reading. The front doorbell rang. The landlady answered it. Sarah stopped reading and listened. Oh yes, you would, just as she did. And then a strong voice was heard at the hall below, and Sarah jumped for her door, leaving the book on the floor. You have guessed it. She reached the top of the stairs just as her farmer came rushing up and held her in his arms. Why haven't you written? Oh, why? Cried Sarah.
New York is a pretty large town,
said Walter Franklin.
I came in a week ago to your old address. I found that you went away on a Thursday. I have been hunting for you with police and otherwise ever since.
I wrote to you, said Sarah vehemently.
Never got it,
said the man. Then how did you find me?" The young farmer smiled a springtime smile.
"I dropped into that restaurant next door this evening,"
said he.
"I like a dish of some kind of greens at this time of the year. I ran my eye down that nice typewritten menu looking for something like that. When I got below cabbage, I turned my chair over and shouted for the owner. He told me where you lived."
"I remember," sighed Sarah, happily. "That was dandelions below cabbage."
"I'd know that cranky capital W way above the line that your typewriter makes anywhere in the world,"
said Franklin. "Why, there's no W in dandelions," said Sarah, in surprise. The young man drew the menu from his pocket and pointed to a line. Sarah recognized the first card she had typewritten that afternoon. There was still a splotch in the upper right-hand corner where a tear had fallen, but over the spot where one should have read the name of the meadow plant, the memory of their golden blossoms had allowed her fingers to strike strange keys. Between the red cabbage and the stuffed green peppers was the item, "Dearest Walter," with hard-boiled egg.